Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go up to all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun. All right, guys. Today's date, July the 3rd, 2024, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm host most Will Buchanan. How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we do get started, guys, let you know that we are a news podcast. We do try to do our best to bring you the news to the most reputable sources with award-winning journalism with awards to match. We do not do sensational news like Fox News, The Blaze, The Daily Beast, whatever Ben Shapiro, Candace Owen, Jesse Peterson show, left or right. We simply don't do that. We provide the facts, something more than the facts. Side fact, guys, there may be some things that's shown tonight that might be a little bit too graphic for younger viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, we might as well go ahead and start. First and foremost, about the debate. Really, there's no way to sugarcoat that. A lot of people believe that, there really was no clear winner. And at the same time, Trump did his usual stick. Biden basically seemed very lethargic. And I've always sat there and said this when it comes to certain debates. Everybody has an off night. President Obama had one. President Bill Clinton had one. Previous politicians have always had some sort of poor debate performances on presidential elections. It happens. Nobody's perfect. But that being said, though, that wasn't the only thing, which we will get to from the fallout from that debate. However, we must address the elephant in the room right now. Something is very wrong with a conservative-leaning Supreme Court. And all I could say is, I told you so.
Tonight, a monumental win at the Supreme Court for former President Trump. The conservative majority finding the presumptive GOP nominee must receive sweeping immunity for any official acts taken during his presidency. The 6-3 ruling a defeat for special counsel Jack Smith, with the court bulldozing through the charges against Mr. Trump for his alleged criminal efforts to stay in power, making the completion of any trial before November virtually impossible. President Biden speaking late tonight.
Today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what the president can do.
Chief Justice John Roberts laying out a new sliding scale of what can be prosecuted, saying a president may not be prosecuted for exercising his core constitutional powers, that he has immunity from prosecution for all his official acts, but that a president has no immunity for private, unofficial acts, while cautioning the president is not above the law. A federal grand jury indicted the former president for orchestrating a conspiracy to retake the White House. Prosecutors alleging he leaned on his DOJ, VP, and state officials to help him reverse the election results, mobilizing meetings of fake electors, it all culminating in the violent attack on the Capitol on January 6. Mr. Trump has pleaded not guilty to all charges and argued without immunity, every president could be prosecuted by political opponents.
If you don't have immunity, you're not going to do anything. You're going to become a ceremonial president. You're not going to take any of the risks.
The majority today agreeing the commander-in-chief must be able to carry out his constitutional duties without risk of political prosecution. Writing, without immunity, such types of prosecutions of ex-presidents could quickly become routine, and that would weaken the presidency, which is exactly what the framers intended to avoid. The special counsel had pushed to get the case to trial before November.
My office will seek a speedy trial.
The ruling now dramatically chipping away at parts of Smith's case. The justices finding Mr. Trump's urging the then Attorney General to investigate voter fraud now absolutely immune from prosecution. What remains in the indictment, including his pressure on his former VP,
Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us,
are now entitled to a presumption of immunity. The liberal justices with a blistering pushback. Justice Sotomayor writing, when a president uses his official powers in any way, under the majority's reasoning, he will now be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? Immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power? Immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon? Immune. Even if these nightmare scenarios never play out, the damage has been done.
And Laura Jarrett joins us now live outside the Supreme Court tonight. Laura, what are official or unofficial actions by the president will be decided by a lower court, and that's going to push the timeline for another Trump trial?
Yes, Tom. Judge Chutkan now has a heavy burden to try to figure out what, if anything, remains in this indictment. And it's going to take some time for her to even get the case, schedule a hearing, potentially bring in witnesses and evidence, all of which Mr. Trump may try to appeal.
Okay, so let's talk about it. I have been saying on this podcast for now going on almost two years plus, the dangers of a conservative-leaning Supreme Court. I feel like the guy who's been wanting to sit there and have a sign all day ever since this ruling came out a few days ago. I want to sit there and go, I told you so. I told you what would happen. Because Trump, for all those that are still wondering, this man is doing everything he can to avoid prison. That's it. It's not about saving the country. It's not about trying to improve his constituents. He is doing all this to avoid jail. That's it. And what has he done to make sure that happens? He's playing the long game and pretty much making a mockery of our legal system. What do I mean by that? Because he said it best. If he gets all of his cases, especially the cases that could derail him from being a president, because again, the only way you could not be a president is if you're convicted or in prison, or unless you murdered somebody or you were a terrorist. The thing about his cases is, as long as they're pushed back, he's free and clear to get the Republican nomination, choose his VP, and then move forward as far as wanting to run for president of the United States again. But it's amazing to me that not only are his court cases pushed back, because now he has some immunity, not officially. I mean, this is where the murky water, and this is where Trump loves this. Trump loves murky water because now that means more time is taken out to sort through the BS to ensure that they can go after him and ensure that, it's a clear-cut, ironclad case. Because if you guys haven't noticed, this is all the hoops they had to jump through when they served a warrant at Mar-a-Lago for the documents he was not supposed to have anymore. Because as president, you do have clearance, but once you're a private citizen, that clearance goes out the window. You don't get to hold on to anything that's considered top secret or highest level because you don't have that clearance anymore. But think about all the hoops they had to go through. The Secret Service had to get involved. The FBI had to get involved. The Attorney General had to be notified. The Florida governor had to be notified. They had to go through so many hoops to serve a search warrant. And now we are back to square one initially, because now Trump has immunity. So what does he have immunity after? Because I can tell you off the bat, he is definitely going to try to go back to repeal his Manhattan conviction. Although, ergo, that happened before he was president. So therefore, and again, this is where the murky water comes into play, because he's had decades of mortgage fraud with New York, was convicted, trying to now appeal it, but he is a convict. He is a felon. There's no getting around that. But his lawyers will argue that the checks he had written at the time were while he was president while he was a president. So they could argue that immunity could actually hold there. And again, welcome to the murky water that is now the legal system that Trump and his lawyers, which I'll give them credit, they are 3 Christmases over by now for the billable hours they're putting in to keep this man out of jail. But now he has immunity. Now it's going to affect a lot of things that he is now facing. Keep in mind, the voter interference in Georgia, that case is now affected. His document case, which he has against the FBI, that's now affected. But again, all that's getting pushed back because now we have to figure out, what does he have presidential protection from? What he doesn't. Because out of that 9-person Supreme Court, 6 conservatives all said when the president does it, it's not illegal. Want to know how that sounds familiar? President Nixon said it. the famous interview where President Nixon got caught on live television saying, when the president does it, it's not illegal. And now, thanks to the Supreme Court, it seems to hold true. But we have to see where the fallout comes from that, because, again, we are going to focus a little bit on the Supreme Court today, because out of all the decisions that have happened, there are 3 more out there we haven't got to yet, but we certainly will. But I know a lot of people are saying, but no man's above the law, even the president. Yes, because those very same justices that voted yes, that Trump should have some presidency, when we go back and look, when they were first getting nominated to the Supreme Court, they all said the same thing.
I guess all of these comments here doing confirmation hearings don't mean anything. Go to my iPad. Watch this.
I believe that no one is above the law under our system, and that includes the president. The president is fully bound by the law, the Constitution, and statutes. I believe that no one
that, of course, is John Roberts. Here's Samuel Alito.
It's above the law. No person in this country, no matter how high or powerful, is above the law. It has been a particular honor for me to serve on the Court of Appeals for these past 15 years.
Now, that's Sam Alito. Now, guess what? Here is Brett Kavanaugh.
No one's above the law in the United States. That's a foundational principle that I've talked about, coming from Federalist 69, coming from the structure of the Constitution. We're all equal before the law in the United States of America.
Well, we know all 3 of them were lying.
So again, thank you, Roland Martin, Unfiltered, but that's 3 justices. Chief Justice John Roberts, Samuel Alito, Brett Kavanaugh. All before their confirmation hearings, all said the same thing. No president, no one, including the president, is above the law. Those very same, before they were Supreme Court justices, all said the same thing. No man, including the president, is above the law, and we believe it as such. So what changed? I'll tell you what changed. Trump. Once Trump got elected, again, he had his own really game he wanted to run. This is the same man who's the only man in modern American history that bankrupted a casino. This great businessman, former and now convict, one of his businesses was a casino. He bankrupted a casino. A foolproof business venture that Las Vegas and other cities that have gambling have proven to be very lucrative. He ran one into the ground. And now this is the same guy who now has been empowered by the Supreme Court. And I've been talking about the Supreme Court since the better part of last year. I have sat there and said that there's a problem with the Supreme Court. It is one of the very few courts in the world that do not have an ethical board. Because most courts, every court has a check and balance, right? We said so with our branches of government. We said the judicial, the executive, legislative branch all have checks and balances. Here's the crazy part. When the Supreme Court makes this ruling, who do they get checked by? Because I hate to sound like a Glorilla song, but who gonna check them, boo? These 9 justices can literally shape how our society as we see fit. 6 of them decided on July 1st that the president can now have immunity. Because again, there are some acts that he should be immune from. And again, we really want to give somebody who I'm about to cover a little bit later that he said about Liz Cheney, we want to give him immunity. This is the same guy that could be in charge of nuclear codes or nuclear launch codes, and you want him in the driver's seat? So I have to imagine what these 6 Supreme Court justices are doing, because I knew the three that dissented, that's a given. It's almost a given whenever you see something that's ruled in conservative favor. It's always been the conservative leaning Supreme Court justices that have went for it. The progressive and liberal judges have dissented from it. So again, with Kavanaugh, with Alito, with Chief Justice John Roberts, with Brett Kavanaugh, with Amy Coney Barrett, with Neil Gorsuch, I'm like, we can keep going on, because these were all but 6 of the conservatives that voted for this. And again, what does that say now that the president, because I can go to Fox News, but let's be honest, Fox News is praising this. Fox News is saying, yes, the president should have this. Trump has been getting a bad rap because, whenever a court ruling goes for Trump, they praise the legal system. But when Trump gets convicted, it's a sad day for the legal system. So no need in playing Fox News because we already know the BS are going to spread. But again, when it comes back to immunity, is it saying a lot that we keep on saying no man is above the law, but our Supreme Court just sat there and said, except the president whenever he does something, because apparently when he does this, it's not illegal. But again, I digress. That is just one of the rulings that we should be shocked by. But before we actually dig into the Supreme Court, guys, how can I put this ever so nicely? Going back to the debate for a second, yes, President Biden really didn't have the best presentation. But people forget, well, he's old. Well, he's 81 years old. Yes, true. He's also dyslexic. He also has a stutter. He had to overcome challenges to actually do public speaking. So, again, I always put it this way when it comes to debates. Every debate prep has a strategy and has an approach. Maybe the approach that they decided on for him that night wasn't the best one. Because Trump, again, when I talk about debates with Trump, and I point this out, there is no debating with Trump. It is pretty much having to not play his game, but at the same time poke holes in his game while showing yours off. Trump is basically a pig. A pig likes mud. If you get in the mud, the only person that's going to like is the pig, and you'll just get dirty. Because, again, that's his wheelhouse. Trump has to sit there and say, oh, well, he's old. He allowed the border talk. He spent more money. He did this. He did that. He can lob lies because he's used to it. He can lob lies to the point to where he believes half the crap he says. The one thing about Biden I was hoping he would do is talk about the accomplishments that he's done. Because really and truly, CNN already has another problem for not letting black media outlets in, which again, they got to answer for. But let's be honest, CNN's under different management now. So that should tell you everything you want to know. But Biden really could have taken advantage of that and sat there and said, you have done nothing positive. Everything you said was a lie. Here's what I've done. Here's what we've done. Here's what the Democratic Party got done. And then explain what you need to do for the next 4 years. See, that's the one thing I was hoping Biden would do, but it just felt like he had to fact check. And here's my thing. Before I get into what the Democrats are trying to do now. Here's my thing. The moderators should have fact checked both sides. Fact checking should not be left to the other person you're debating against because, again, they're trying to prove a case. Fact checking should be done by the moderators. I showed one guy who was the moderator for Colorado, and he fact checked on site with those representatives. And that's beautiful because that's how it should be done. But again, with Biden's poor performance now, all you have basically heard is that maybe it's time for him to stand down because he just might be too old.
Doubts from within his party and new polling that shows the president falling further behind former President Trump. Today, candidate Biden telling his team, no one is pushing me out. The president and vice president held a conference call with campaign staff. Officials say he was direct, saying to aides, let me say this as clearly as I possibly can, as simply and straightforward as I can. I am running. Nearly a week after the debate that the White House labels a bad night, the president called key congressional Democrats, officials here acknowledging the strain.
That the last few days have been challenging.
With more troubling signs in new polling done after the debate. President Biden now trailing former President Trump by 6 points. 80% of those surveyed said they consider the president too old to run again. Biden allies say the president must counter that perception.
President Biden has got to go out there and on a sustained basis show he has the stamina and can do the job.
But a second House Democrat, Arizona's Raul Grijalva, has now called on Mr. Biden to drop out. The president's only public event today, a Medal of Honor ceremony in the East Room. Son Hunter Biden in attendance. The president ignoring reporters' questions. The White House says the president is now feeling great after citing a cold on debate night. The president told donors Tuesday evening that he had jet lag too, though the debate was 12 days after his return from Europe. The president said that this is not an excuse, but an explanation. Meanwhile, the White House is also trying to blunt any signal the president is even talking about an exit, and rejected a report from the New York Times, not confirmed by NBC News, that the president told an ally he is weighing whether to continue.
Is the president telling people he's evaluating the race? False. That is absolutely false.
All right, Kelly, that poll you cited, just one of several new polls showing the debate did real damage to the Biden campaign.
And the Biden campaign is responding to the polling, saying that they argue the race is incredibly tight. While tonight the president and vice president continue outreach with a meeting with more than 20 Democratic governors on video call, and some are here in person, looking to shore up support and to address their concerns.
And this is why I keep saying the Democrats will always seem to have this problem, that one little performance, and now everybody is panicking. Oh, well, maybe we need a new candidate. He's too old. There's no way he could beat Biden. There's no way Biden can beat Trump. I'm like, I feel as a concerned voter, I'm like, how are you guys in office? I have shown, like I said on the previous podcast, I've shown previous videos where former Secretary of State Hillary, Miss Clinton herself, danced circles around Trump in a debate. Even more so, predicted everything that would happen in his presidency did happen. She didn't miss on anything with this man. Biden, when he debated Trump, will you shut up, man? Remember that quote? But he has one night, and now all of a sudden, oh, well, he needs to step down. Okay, let's think about this for a second. Let's play devil's advocate here. Okay, we'll play devil's advocate. If in the event that Biden had stepped down, Kamala Harris is next. Kamala Harris would basically be the president. She would be the next candidate to be supported. She would get the nomination. She would be promoted to president. She would be promoted as the presidential nominee. She would have to pick her VP, which makes her historically the first Black woman to run for president of the United States and could possibly win. And this is the crazy part. She's probably closer as a candidate for the presidential of the United States if in the event that happens. So it's amazing where people are calling, well, Biden should step down. And I've been saying this at the end of every podcast. Who would run? Who would you get? Because now the question becomes, if Biden decided that, you know what, I'm no longer running for president, I am stepping down at the end of my term, who would you get? And I stress that question because outside of Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, who do you get? And this is where the Democrats, and I hate to say this is where they lose all the time. Instead of y'all just shoring up your support behind Biden and say, we stand by our president. We stand by him. He had a bad night. He will bounce back. He is a better option than Trump coming back. Why is it that nobody on the Democratic side is saying that? And again, this is a problem where people are going like, well, the Democrats are already looking at him and thinking the early replacement. Why the fact do we need to give him the ability? Why do we need to give him the time of day? So again, this is the part, guys, where I point this out. That for the simple fact of the matter is, you think the Democrats would show up support for this man. You think the Democrats would be behind Biden, instead of a few of them saying, we might need to discuss this with him. If you show dissension in the ranks, people will sit there and look at you and go, you don't even support him, and yet why do I need to? This is the problem, and the problem that will keep happening until support is shown. Because Republicans, they'll ride that Trump train out. They got no choice. They've seen what happens when you go against Trump. They have seen what happens when you decide to go against the quote-unquote tyrannical dictator. You've seen what happens. Even more so, he remembers, especially in the fact that now convicted felon Donald Trump decides that, hey, since I have immunity now, I want to make some changes, like hold former people who went against me in televised military tribunals. I cannot make this up.
Peter Baker is expressing support for holding televised military tribunals against former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney. The former president reposted this image on his Truth Social account on Sunday. It reads, quote, Liz Cheney is guilty of treason. Read Truth if you want televised military tribunals. In response, Cheney wrote on X, quote, Donald is this is the type of thing that demonstrates yet again that you are not a stable adult and you are not fit for office. Of course, we've had that conversation, Peter Baker, about all those who are calling for Joe Biden to step down, worried about his fitness, and just letting all of this go by. It's not that let it go by, but they don't make it like a call for him to step down and a call for Americans to look at his fitness. We'll put that aside for a second. And I ask you, should Donald Trump be taken seriously about his threats? Can we look at his first or second campaign and the promises he made and then the things that he followed through on and draw to that as knowing that his pattern would be the answer is yes?
Yeah, I think we should take Donald Trump seriously. I think what we learned in his first term was that he obviously likes to say a lot of things that are provocative that he may not follow up on. But then on some of the things he says that are provocative, he does follow up on. And some of the things he says that were provocative that he didn't follow up on were only because he was surrounded at the time by more establishment Republicans or figures, military officers and so forth, who discouraged him, talked him out of it, threw sand in the gears, whatever, made sure it didn't happen. These are not people who will be there in a second term. We know that. So when he says he's for termination of the Constitution in order to return to power, when he says his new term in office would be about retribution, when he says that Liz Cheney should be put on a military trial, I think you have to assume that he's serious about that and he won't have people around him who will try to stop him. And now the question is, of course, about accountability. One thing that this ruling does is it reinforces the fact that we have not figured out the proper way, an effective way to hold a chief executive accountable in this country. We've now learned that impeachment doesn't work. Right? As long as the president's party has at least 1/3 of the members of the Senate, no president is ever going to be convicted in an impeachment trial. That's very clear. Certainly, Donald Trump is not going to be afraid of impeachment if he's in office again. And so that's not really a form of accountability anymore. The courts obviously have failed in 4 years since the last election to tell us whether or not his attempt to overturn an election was illegal or not.
And so also some other parts of this. You can't put a civilian on a military tribunal. It sounds nice because, again, Trump has this ever-loving affection for dictators. And he believes, and it's amazing to me how people don't take what he said to Time magazine earlier this year very seriously, where he said he would be a dictator when he comes back. He sat there and said that he would, for lack of better words, dismantle certain federal agencies, fire public workers, and basically reverse the convictions of those that participated in the insurrection on January 6th, which we'll get to momentarily because the Supreme Court's kind of already done the work for him. This man is unhinged, but at the same time, unhinged people seem to flock together because he still has his flock that follows him, that give him money for his stuff, that gives his money for his legal bills. The RNC covers it too. But at the same time, it is amazing how this man has sat there and said half the things he wants to do. And yet at the same time, now that he has immunity, it's going to be a little hard to finally get this man to face justice, because now he's on a revenge tour, which again tells you everything you want to hear. But the reason why I wanted to take a little bit of the podcast tonight and stick with the Supreme Court, because the immunity ruling wasn't the only thing that the Supreme Court covered. And each of these rulings I'm about to talk about will affect us very much so. I will talk about the first one, the Chevron decision, which again, I'll explain very closely, but you really should be paying attention to this one because this was one of the other landmark ruling cases they reversed on.
Yeah, from the Supreme Court overturning Chevron NRDC. For that, we'll turn to Eamon Javers. Hey, Eamon.
Carl, that's right. This is a sweeping decision by the Supreme Court to overturn what's called the Chevron precedent here. The reason it's significant is because it has enormous implications for the administrative state in the United States of America and all federal agencies and their ability to interpret the law. What the Chevron precedent was a 1984 case from the Supreme Court, which held that in absence of other information, courts should give deference to administrative agencies' interpretation of the law. That gave a huge area of wiggle room for federal agencies to interpret what Congress meant when it passed given laws, if there was any gray area in those laws. What the Supreme Court is now saying this morning in a 6-3 decision is that courts may not defer to an agency interpretation of the law simply because a statute is ambiguous. Chevron, they say, is overruled. Again, that is a 6-3 decision. One interesting point here, going back to the Chevron case originally in 1984, the Supreme Court writes, Chevron, decided in 1984 by a bare quorum of 6 justices, triggered a marked departure from the traditional judicial approach of independently examining each statute to determine its meaning. So some skepticism here of whether that case was originally decided correctly. The Supreme Court now saying it was not. Chevron is overturned, and there's going to be enormous questions now, Carl, for administrative agencies across the federal government as to how they move forward with interpreting rules when there is a gray area in the law. A lot of uncertainty now for federal agencies, Carl. Back over to you.
Okay. So again, to basically explain this, and I want to be as really clear as humanly possible. So historically, the Chevron case that they're talking about, which was, I think was, and also I'd be very careful because I gotta say this correctly because I know somebody's gonna stand and say, no, that's not right. So basically, in Relentless versus Department of Commerce and Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo, those two, again, this is the part where the Chevron case comes into play. So what usually happens is, because this was basically the reason why it's called the Chevron Doctrine, initially back in 1984, was Chevron versus the Natural Resources Defense Council, which again directed the fact that federal agencies were considered the experts in the fields into which they were enforcing. Which again, just to give you an example, say for instance the EPA saw an environmental act that was caused by a corporation or a company or individual. The EPA could actually follow up with said people, including all types of actions, including matters of legal and penalization. And again, the courts would have to follow them because the EPA are the experts, hence the Chevron doctrine. So here's the crazy part. Because now the leaning Supreme Court, conservative leaning Supreme Court, decided that that's not really right and it should be left up to the courts. They shot that down. So now, what have they done? They have just literally sat there and said that we're going to take the power of these federal agencies and it has to be relative to the courts, which means the justices are now the experts, which makes it harder for federal entities like the EPA, like I'll even go as far as the Credit Bureau, as far as the CDC, the FBI, the ATF. All of these guys are now going to have harder times because the fact that the Chevron doctrine is no longer in place. Does it make it harder for their cases to be made? Yes. Will it make it almost impossible? Hard to say. Because now it used to be to where when companies did bring this forward, they had no problem with this. None at all. But it is amazing to me that stripping the federal authority department, these federal authority agencies of their power, leaves it open to interpretation now. Again, something very simple that now only corporations and certain people in certain areas are going to benefit well, because now it's no longer an open and shut case if a three-letter agency comes looking for you. And again, that's the part that, again, people are not understanding. That's going to be a problem, a very big problem. And wait for the next environmental disaster. I hope it doesn't happen, but they'll see what happens when the Chevron doctrine is removed, when you have another mass trail derailment that may have contained nuclear waste, or you may have a next oil spill that actually happened near a viable drinking water source, Watch what happens when something of that nature and it falls under these three-letter agencies, and you're going to find out very quickly why that Chevron doctrine was important. But again, that's one. Let's get to number two, because apparently bans or fines on homeless people sleeping out on public areas, to where some cities and even some states were doing bans that targeted homeless people, bans that included fines or jail time if they couldn't pay the fines. Well, it got to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, it's okay.
All right, happening now. We're going back to the Supreme Court, where the latest round of opinions are in this morning. It was the case involving homelessness and loitering laws. The Supreme Court is permitting cities to enforce bans on homeless people sleeping outside, even if shelter space is lacking. And this ruling comes as a rising number of people in the United States are without a permanent place to live. There are 4 cases left, folks, including presidential immunity and a January 6th case. But let's dig into this ruling with defense attorney and former federal prosecutor Scott Frederickson, who joins me now. Scott, so this was an interesting case. This had to do with the city of Grants Pass, Oregon, and what they were saying, and what they were saying to the Supreme Court, is that they wanted to enforce what they call an anti-camping law or statute that allows police and other local officials to remove homeless people from certain areas of a city. But there were others who said that this was cruel and unusual punishment as defined by the 8th Amendment of the Constitution. So what did the court say?
Well, the court, in a 6-3 decision, said that the city of Grants Pass can enforce their ordinance prohibiting and punishing homeless people for sleeping and camping out in public spaces. This was an important decision, not just for the city of Grants Pass, but for all over the country, for all the cities and communities dealing with the homeless population. The lower court had said that, look, you can't go in and punish a homeless person when they have no place to go. And that violates the 8th Amendment cruel and unusual treatment provision. The Ninth Circuit agreed, said, nope, you can't punish homeless. You can't arrest them, detain them, fine them, criminalize this. The Supreme Court overturned that, said, well, yes, you can do that. The 8th Amendment does not control our homeless policy. And in this 6-3 decision made very clear that communities now, such as Grants Pass or San Francisco or New York, Alabama or Texas, can address homeless by the problem by removing the people from public spaces. The other interesting thing about this is this ruling was challenged below by both liberals and conservatives, by the governor of California, and by the states of Montana and Alabama. They all attempted to overturn this with the idea of retaining control to address homelessness in their communities. The Supreme Court agreed.
Yeah, so this is interesting, Scott, because, and I know that the court doesn't deal with what would become now a city or a local problem, right? So the city does have the ability to enforce this anti-camping rule. They can remove homeless people. The Supreme Court says you are not punishing them for the simple act of being homeless, being without a place to stay, without a shelter. But now, of course, what do you do with people that you're removing from various public areas? That's something the court is not addressing. But perhaps was there something mentioned in the dissent?
Well, the dissent was very strong in opposing this and saying, you know, you cannot criminalize a person essentially for the status of being homeless when they have no place to go. So essentially, you're arresting someone for their status of being homeless when they have no place to go, when the city or community has not provided a place for them to go. And so they're saying this does violate the 8th Amendment. These people don't have a choice, and then you're turning them into criminals. But the Supreme Court took a different view. They're essentially saying, well, the policy on this, the power and authority should reside with the community to determine this. So one shouldn't interpret this opinion to mean that communities are going to go in and start arresting and putting people in jail necessarily. And that's why both progressive liberals, such as the governor of California, as well as conservative states such as Alabama and Montana, challenged this ruling because they want the authority and the power to deal with the homelessness, which at times may mean coming in, doing sweeps, criminalizing people who stay there, in violation of their community regulations. So this will import a big change in the way communities can deal with homelessness.
All right. And Scott, real quick.
So again, this is another reason why we should be paying attention, because the Supreme Court just said 2 cities and states that have bans on homelessness, that have fines or what have you, that they can be upheld. Keep in mind, we are now living in a country where hedge funds and mortgage companies own more homes than homeowners. The cost of living is crazy in a lot of areas, and you dang near have to have a $75,000 to $80,000 job to, in some areas, some parts of the country, to even get a 2-bedroom apartment. I know here in Tennessee, a 2-bedroom apartment is almost anywhere from $1,500 to almost $2,000 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. That is paying mortgage. What that is 2001 to 2002 mortgage fees. Paying a mortgage. You're paying more on a mortgage. And yet, what has happened? Some people are one or two paychecks away from being homeless. But yet the homeless population ban homeless people from sleeping in public areas, public parks, things of that nature. And not only have they enforced it, some of these people have been picked up and guess what? Put in jail or given fines. Fines that they can't pay, guess what? You go to jail. So who does this benefit? Because cities can sit there with their homeless bans and say, oh, well, it helps to knock down crime. It helps to knock down our poverty rates. Yes, but the true winners are your court systems and incarceration areas. The prison industry sees this as a win because, again, you're trying to not make your city look like it's a third world country. But the thing about it is, homelessness is a problem in America. Shelters are full. People are barely trying to get by, working 2 or 3 jobs plus to break even. At the same time, the idea of rent, the idea of living has not been, the cost of living in an apartment, much less a home, have not been addressed. But yet, our biggest problem which somehow made it to the Supreme Court was homelessness. Because a problem with homelessness is, guys, if we can't fix that problem, it's only going to get worse. So how do we do it? Out of sight, out of mind. Again, I know this might not affect a lot of us who are in homes or in apartments, but let's think about this. Like I said, the way the economy is set up right now, for a lot of us, we're 1 or 2 paychecks away from being homeless ourselves. Because trust and believe, they'll be quick to remove you if you can't make those payments, and we'll slide somebody else in, and the wheel begins again. But at the same time, homelessness is a problem that should not be met with bans and fines. It will not work that way. But thanks to the Supreme Court, again, all conservatives voting for this, all liberals and progressives voting down against this. But hey, when you're 6-3, this is the dangers of the Supreme Court. But wait, there's more. Because now the Supreme Court also ruled that you can, bribery is okay. What I mean by that is, guys, is this story here. So again, this also came out in the Supreme Court where basically there was a case, in the case of James Snyder. He was a mayor out of Portage, Indiana, who was convicted and sentenced to 21 months in prison for violating the law at the time, known as Section 666. What he basically did was he received $13,000 from a truck company that had received new contracts from the city that could total over $1 million. Snyder says the $13,000 he was given for this said company getting this awarded city contract was for consulting fees. But federal prosecutors sat there and said, no, $13,000, that's illegal gratuities. For all those that have been in those, boring ass training classes where in some corporations where you have to learn about gratuities and what you can and cannot accept, I am sorry, accepting $13,000 and calling it a consultant fee for the same company that awarded it to you and now got the $1 million contract with the city, that is a bribe. Well, the Supreme Court said, no, it's fine. They simply said it is not a crime for local officials to accept a gratuity for acts that they've already taken. Brett Kavanaugh said, quote unquote, that the federal law does not supplement those state and local rules by subjecting 19 million state and local officials up to 10 years federal prison for accepting even commonplace gratuities. I'm sorry. When did accepting $13K is considered commonplace? I'm going to be honest with you guys. If you are given a large amount of money for your opinion to be swayed one way or another, it's bribery. That's exactly what it was. This guy cannot sit there, who now is now overturned and now a free man. This man cannot say that the $13K he was given from the said company, who now won the contract, he can't sit there and say, oh, that's for consulting fees. Consulting fees? What are you getting for $13,000 that's considered consulting? That's bribery. But now the Supreme Court had ruled that, hey, it's not bribery, just commonplace gratuities. You know what you've just done? You have basically just empowered not just politicians, but those in influential areas that they can accept money before or after the fact, and it's not considered legal. It's not considered illegal anymore. I can just leave that door open right there. Do you know how many folks will now use that case to prove that what they have is not bribery, but gratuity? This is the part where, guys, I keep saying the entire time, this is the dangers of a conservative-leaning Supreme Court. They have just turned around and gave Dorito immunity. They have turned around and sat there and said that, hey, the three-letter government agencies don't have the same legal authority in courts that they used to anymore. They said that cities that have homeless bans can be upheld. And I just now said they have legalized bribery. You're probably wondering what the cherry is on top right now, right? Well, remember when I sat there and talked about the fact that those January 6th insurrectionists, where a lot of them actually got jail time? Well, it turns out that could be a problem, because on Supreme Court threw out the charges for a former police officer who was there during the January 6th insurrection acts, and by a vote of 6-3, it's amazing how that number keeps coming up, that these justices ruled that the individual here, the former police officer that was charged with violating bar, which includes bars obstruction of office of a local proceeding, which again was the electoral count, says that no, his charges got rolled down from basically being a terrorist to just breaking and entering and evidence tampering. And again, it amazes me so that this man was literally given almost the same level as a terrorist, has now been reduced to misdemeanors. Now, why are you probably wondering that? Why we're bringing this up? Well, we're bringing this up because, again, just like the bribery case, those guys and girls on January 6th can now use that case and say, hey, we weren't terrorists. We were just doing such and such. And now the Supreme Court has upheld it. So, guys, what am I getting at here? Outside of the fact that the Supreme Court, 6 of the 3, it's always been 6-3. I have yet to read any of those 4 cases that I just went over. 6-3 was the ruling. 6 conservatives decided that it was okay. 3 liberals and progressives said it was not okay. But because we have a conservative-leaning Supreme Court, this is what happened. And now, again, Dorito has immunity. We have now just sat there and said that government agencies don't have the same legal power that they used to anymore. We have said that homelessness bans that cities have done can now be upheld. We've just sat there and said that bribery is now legal. And of course, those that have participated in the January 6th insurrection may wind up getting a pass after all. 5 decisions all made within a week. 5 landmark decisions. And I keep saying this the entire time. And I hope to God Biden, who now, because now Trump has immunity, so does Biden. If I was Biden, I'd be looking at the Supreme Court. And with what little time I have left, not to say that Trump may have a snowball's chance in hell of winning the presidency, but if I was Biden and I've just now been given the green light to turn around and sit there and say, hey, anything I do is now not illegal. I'm looking at Supreme Court and I'm going, I could balance it. I could overthrow it. Who can stop me? Because I guarantee you, if he said that tomorrow, oh, Fox News will be losing their heads. Hello, sir. It is literally Star Wars and Darth Sidious. Yeah, pretty much. The Galactic Empire is showing big time. And I cannot stress that any further. But yeah, you're 100% right. But yes, that's the thing about what's happening with the Supreme Court right now. That's 4 decisions that I talked about. And now those 4 decisions are pretty much going to shape how we do things for a little while. But if I was Biden, hey, man, you got immunity. Go nuts. But speaking of things that are going nuts, I cannot believe I'm saying this, guys, but in Ohio, they believe that public schools should now be mandated. A public school superintendent believes that in his Oklahoma education system that they should now be including regular Bible lessons with the school. I cannot make this up.
From Oklahoma's top education official requires all public schools to teach the Bible and the 10 Commandments starting in the fall. Stephanie Sy has the details.
Now, just weeks after Louisiana law mandated the display of the 10 Commandments in classrooms, Oklahoma is now requiring the Bible's inclusion in lesson plans, not only in studying history or comparative religions, but, quote, ensuring our students grasp the core values and historical context of our country. For more, we're joined by the author of this new directive, Oklahoma State Superintendent of Public Education, Ryan Walters. Superintendent Walters, welcome to the NewsHour. Let's start right in with this new directive. Your memorandum says, quote, effective immediately, all Oklahoma schools are required to incorporate the Bible, which includes the 10 Commandments, as an instructional support. It also says immediate and strict compliance is expected. Sir, what does compliance mean? Because that's wide open for interpretation. It could mean referencing how Shakespeare employs scripture in his plays, or it could mean memorizing Bible verses. Which is it? And are teachers going to be able to decide for themselves?
Well, thanks for the question there. We've issued this guidance and we are issuing additional guidance to classroom on specificity in the upcoming weeks. So we have standards that are in place that talk about that our teachers are to teach the role religion played in the classroom. We have since seen that they are not doing that. They are not talking about in their classroom the role that the Bible played in American history. So we will be offering additional guidance to districts that they will have to comply with, which is to ensure the teaching of our standards and the role the Bible played in American history, dating back pre the Constitution, whether it's the Mayflower Compact, the Pilgrims, all the way up through Martin Luther King Jr. and civil rights movement, where he repeatedly quotes the Bible as a directive for what he's trying to do there.
Your critics charge that this is a clear violation, not only of parental rights, but of the Constitution. Here's what Rachel Lazar with Americans United for Separation of Church and State had to say.
It's not about teaching religion as an inspiration for literature at times, or art, and that's all permissible, or teaching comparative religion. This is about claiming the Christian nationalist myth that America is a Christian country. And this is also about preaching and not teaching, because when Ryan Walters announced the policy, he made clear that he was requiring teachers to have the Bible in every classroom and, quote, to teach from it. That's not education, that's indoctrination, and it's unconstitutional.
Superintendent Walters, the Bible is not banned in any schools. It's allowed to be taught already in Oklahoma schools. And yet your own Constitution says the schools should be open to all children and free from sectarian control. Given the Oklahoma Supreme Court's recent decision against publicly funding a religious charter school, do you think this policy will remain, or are you just making a political point?
Yeah, the left, they can be offended, they can be mad, they can be upset, but what they can't do is they can't rewrite history. We are going to show the countless citations. The Bible was cited more than any other document in the 1600s, 1700s political writings. It is clearly a momentous President Trump's nominees to the U.S. Supreme Court, that if we get sued and we get challenged, we will be victorious, because the Supreme Court justices he appointed actually are originalists that look at the Constitution and not what some left-wing professor said about the Constitution. So we feel very confident in it moving forward and winning every legal case.
For the record, the Constitution itself does not mention God or Jesus or Christian in its text. But going back to your memo, is every teacher expected to understand how to teach what trained theologians like Dr. King spent their lives trying to interpret? Are you going to have Bible classes for teachers? And what if they don't comply? What happens?
Well, first, you made an absurd assumption there, which is the Declaration of Independence said our right come from our Creator. That was a distinct change in world history there. And also the separation of church and state appears nowhere in the Declaration of Independence or Constitution. So y'all continue to cite people who say that obviously don't know what they're talking about. And what we're going to continue to do is we're going to make sure our kids know history. They're going to see citations. They're going to see quotations. They're going to see directly from individuals who said the Bible impacted their decision-making. That is in our standards. If teachers don't want to teach it, they are compelled to teach it, or they can find another job. You don't get to pick and choose what standards you teach. The same way if a teacher came in and said, I don't want to teach the civil rights movement. Well, it's in our standards, so then you're going to have to find another job. We will make sure that our kids in Oklahoma understand American history. We will not be censored by left-wing extremists who don't want the Bible mentioned in our classroom, and that's what we'll continue to do here.
What is the real goal here? When you talk about core values, what do you mean? Because critics believe measures like this lead to more division and hate. And in schools, that could mean bullying or ostracizing certain students.
Yeah, that's an absurd assumption. We've been very clear what our goal is here. It's for our kids to understand American history. The left has been at war with the Bible in schools. They've removed the Bible from schools. It is academically incredibly, it is incredible to have an academic course on U.S. history and not include the Bible's influence in American history. So we will continue to fix that so that our kids understand this country, understand why the founders designed it in the way that they did, and understand the role that the Bible played in American history. And frankly, it's the #1 best-selling book in American history. If that doesn't meet a test to be in a classroom for its literary value or its historical relevance, I don't know what book would meet that criteria.
That is the superintendent of public.
Okay, so that was something. That was something, because again, I'm just going to start from the beginning, work my way down. So yes, that Oklahoma educator decided that yes, the Bible should now be taught in public schools. I love how they sit there and say, well, they keep mentioning that separation of church and state. The separation of church and state is not mentioned in the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution. Not word for word, no, but I think there's a little thing about Amendment 1 where it says that no law should be infringed upon any type of religion, because the simple fact of the matter is he's talking about the Bible, which again would be Judeo-Christianism, which, for lack of better words, you want to teach one area of religion and religion alone in a public school. Much like Louisiana, that decided that the 10 Commandments should be posted in every classroom, because apparently 1st through 6th graders need to learn about thou shalt not covet another man's wife, or thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not blaspheme, thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. I mean, do really for 1 through 6th graders need to learn that? Something they won't even apply anyway. But it is amazing to me now that that man that was talking was basically repeating himself with every question. Well, it's the extreme left that doesn't want this, that doesn't want the Bible in public schools. Right. Because there's this little line about teaching religion in an area to where religion is not centralized, nor is it just one religion that's followed. We are a diverse melting pot of religions, especially in public schools. So at the same time, I don't understand why in public schools the Bible should be taught. It sounds like this man should be looking for a private Christian school. That's what it sounds like to me. At the same time, he says, well, the Bible is a historical document. Don't know if you really want to go with that. I'm just saying, for A Bible that has been remixed so many times that P. Diddy probably has a credit on it, but you're going to say it's a historical document. You're also going to say the Bible actually plays a historical reference in America's history. No, it really doesn't. If anything, religion was the reason why the original founding fathers may have actually left a tyrannical government. That's probably where you're going to end up there, guy. But again, it amazes me how he sat there and he stuck to those things. Well, we're going to teach real history. Well, it's just like, well, teachers don't want to teach it. Well, they either can do it or they can find another job. It's like the civil rights movement. Ooh. I don't know if you really want to use that one, because for the lack of a better word, there's a lot of state educational systems, much like Oklahoma, that really don't talk about civil rights. You guys won't even talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma. Literally, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Students in Oklahoma will never know what the Tulsa Massacre is if it wasn't for Lovecraft Country. Just being honest with you. One show that sprinkled in a little bit of history led to a mass Google search on what the Tulsa Massacre was. Even celebrities like Tom Hanks, who had no idea that an event happened until that show. So you're going to stand and tell me, what historical reference does the Bible have? See, this is why I would have loved to interview him, because I'd be like, okay, what historical reference does the Bible have in American history? Because the last time I checked, wars were fought over religion before they decided to blame it on video games. But what historical context? And again, this always goes back to teachers. I'm like, number one, I have a special place in my heart for teachers, for educators. They really get a whole lot of crap for putting up with, because you have some states wanting to arm them. You have some states wanting them to accept the low pay, to accept the overcrowding, to accept the ridiculous curriculum, because parents believe this, because some parents out there believe that they know better than the educators do. But now in Oklahoma, you want teachers to basically become theologians. You basically want them to sit there and say, hey, I want you to teach your child about the Bible. What if your child is Muslim? What if your child's Buddhist? What if your child is not anything? And what if your child's a Satanist? Can you see where I'm going with this here? That they're trying to enforce, and what it basically is, and what it comes down to, guys, is indoctrination 101. Because again, some people believe that we should never take Jesus out of school. We took Jesus out of school, and this is what happens. We took prayer out of schools. No, we didn't. This is the moment of silence is for. The moment of silence was for you to do whatever you need to do and move on. It's just like the Pledge of Allegiance. I stopped saying the Pledge of Allegiance in fourth grade because as I sat there with my hand over my heart, looking to the left at old Betsy, I was like, why am I saying this? I don't believe half of what this pledge is. And in fourth grade, I was like, it made no sense. But they're basically saying, now you have to say the pledge. Now you have to read the Bible. And again, yeah, I can see that being tied up as far as the legal sides of things, but it makes no sense, except the fact that, guys, this is what we've been saying whenever it comes to the fact of the matter that this is what they're pushing forward. You know, when I talk about voting, this is what I mean. When you get these people who I call religious nuts, they're just one level below Trump. But when those people get in office, that's what happens. When you get the Moms for Liberty in office, books get attacked. When you get religious nuts put in office, they decide to enforce what they believe because they believe they're morally superior, when really they're just full of shit. This is what happens because those folks got the votes to be in there, and now they're going to influence other people because they simply believe that what they're doing is right. There is a reason, and I cannot stress this enough. And I even mentioning Project 2025 doesn't ring the same anymore because, again, yes, this was a plan that was concocted on a southern plantation, which is still funny to say that, but it's true how it's operating. Again, we should not be surprised, but we now, if this is not a warning light to be active in this election cycle and everyone, therefore, moving forward, especially if you're a woman or a person of color, don't know what to tell you at this point, except that unless you're just waiting to see what happens and if idiocracy becomes a real thing, be active, I hope. At least that's my hope for you. But moving right along, guys, we do got four more things. Again, for a story that sounds like it came out of Criminal Minds, and I really do mean it comes out of Criminal Minds, or probably Law and Order SVU. But anyway, a West Virginia couple charged with trafficking their adopted black children to be used as slaves. This, serial-looking couple, Janine Whitaker and Donald Lance, had adopted 5 black children. Now, during an anonymous 911 call, the caller had suggested that they saw the 5 children basically working on the farm, at the same time not allowed to go into the house. Of course, when deputies did investigate for a welfare check, they found out that the 5 children were basically locked in a shack outside the house. That shack had no running water. That shack had no windows. Basically, it was just a locked area in the event that if something did happen, God forbid, or a fire had happened, these 5 children cannot get out. So now these 2 people, again, looking like a serial killer couple that's just been on every Law and Order SVU episode known to man, are now facing a 17-count indictment with human trafficking, civil rights violations, and use of a minor child and forced labor and child neglect. Of course, they declined, saying that, well, and I cannot, and I gotta scroll down to this part. I have to say this because they really do believe this, and I cannot make this up. So the children had no means to exit the bar of their own, no running water, no bathroom facilities, and were obviously deprived of adequate hygiene or care. According to the deputy, the female juvenile also stated she and her 14-year-old brother were not allowed outside the house. There were no accessible windows in the room away for children to exit. If there was a medical emergency fire, they were basically screwed. However, Miss Whitefeather made the admission to the detective that the children were left in the shed, but stated they liked it. You're telling me that bitch right there, and again, forgive my language, sat there and said that they liked being in a locked shed? And it is amazing to me when I talk about this, guys. That's not news anywhere. Granted, yes, CNN. But why is this not national news? A white couple housed 5 black children used them for forced labor, locked them in a shed, and the wife said, oh, but they liked it. Why is that not national news? Because keep in mind, there is a certain group of people out there that swear up and down that they're protecting children from predators, things of that nature, and yet they're silent. Can't find it on Fox News anywhere, can't find it on Newsmax anywhere. But at the same time, this is the same party that's for the protection of life, will defend an unborn baby, but will ignore child trafficking by folks who look like they honestly should be locked up, but now are facing multiple counts because they basically took 5 black kids and decided to use them as their own little worker camp. I'm just going to be honest. Oh, the book gets thrown at their ass, but we'll follow that story as it comes along. But moving on, guys, we did want to cover this again in Youth in New York, where, again, a story of a young man losing his life, and the details of that story sound way too familiar.
Answers after police fatally shot a 13-year-old boy. Police saying he was holding a replica gun. Now the body cam video is out. Emily Aketa has it, and we do want to warn you, the images are disturbing.
New video of a gut-wrenching police shooting that killed a 13-year-old boy tonight, prompting growing demands for answers and accountability. Family of Nimue, who graduated 8th grade just last week, joined protesters outside of Utica, New York City Hall.
I can't accept the fact that he's gone from our family.
On Friday night, Utica police officers approached Mue and another young person who they say matched a suspect description for a recent robbery.
Can I just pat you down and make sure you got no weapons on you?
Body camera video shows that's when the teen took off. Police pausing and highlighting the video where they say Mue pointed what looked like a handgun at officers, later learning it was a replica Glock pellet gun. Police tackled Mue and seconds later fired a shot. A use of force protesters say went too far. Mue's family is part of Utica's robust refugee population, members of the Karen, an ethnic group from Myanmar.
Our parents, they fled war, they fled persecution. We are the future. This is our home. We're not running away.
Utica's mayor now urging patience.
People want justice, but they don't want to see due process. We have to see the process play out.
The state attorney general's office and Utica police are both investigating. In the meantime, the officers involved are on administrative paid leave. Tom?
So the reason why I bring that up is because, again, the details of that story sound very familiar. That, again, officers pretty much fired on an individual that said that they looked like that he had a gun. And the reason why I bring that up, guys, is because the very creepy, or I should say almost chilling timing of this was that the officer that fatally shot Tamir Rice just a few days ago resigned from the police department in West Virginia. Keep in mind, Tamir Rice also was back in 2014, was playing with a pellet gun, and he was shot and killed by former officer Timothy Loman. Now, of course, for all those that do remember, Timothy Loman was never charged. He was actually cleared of the actual case of Tamir Rice, and then moved 300 miles away to become an officer in another state. In another city. He is now retired from that, which again says a lot. That the man that killed Tamir Rice was able to go to another city and still be a law enforcement officer until he decided to retire as of this year. Now, again, I can go back, and you guys have heard me multiple times talk about, my standing on the police, my standing on the fact that, for lack of better words, we do need police reform. We almost had it. We almost had the George Floyd Police Reform Act until America's favorite Uncle Tom, Mr. Tim Scott, killed the bill. Because, again, that was his job. That was his marching orders from the conservatives. Kill the bill because the bill did remove no-knock warrants, chokeholds. It almost removed quantitative immunity from police. Because, again, police don't have to give statements, and police don't have to give statements until 48 hours later. Police can actually view the evidence before they give the statement. Police can actually talk with other law enforcement officers before they give the statements. Unfortunately, not the same as being said for the people they arrest or the victims that are no longer here to speak for them. And again, they keep on saying due process. What's the due process about? Because I find it interesting that when officers do everything right, the evidence comes out almost immediately. When there's a chance that they did it wrong, we need to look at it. We need to review it. We need to do this. But we actually voted in Nashville at the time because of a similar situation. We had voted for a civilian oversight committee. Of course, the law enforcement here did not like it because I don't know why. You protect and serve the public. You should be able to answer to the public. That's simple. If you do, as they always tell us, if you're doing nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear. The same thing can be said for law enforcement. If you're doing everything right, you shouldn't have a problem about having oversight. Well, here's the funny thing about that. That civilian oversight board got dismantled as of 3 years ago when we had Governor idiot Bill Lee in charge, and he and the state legislature removed the civilian oversight board from the police, almost because of the fact that we are completely a red state. But when we did have civilian oversight, yes, law enforcement did have to answer. They had to answer to claims and complaints and things of that nature because we had to make sure that the officers we're empowering to protect and serve are doing that without killing anybody. The same can be said for the nation, and I keep saying this all the time. You can train longer. And again, I have yet to have a law enforcement officer tell me wrong, and I will still say that into 2024. You have to train longer to be a nail technician, a plumber, contractor, an IT tech, a construction worker. You have to train longer in any of those professions. Whereas in the good old South, especially here in Nashville, Tennessee, within 6 months, you can be a law enforcement officer and be prepared to protect and serve inside a half a year. A half a year is not enough to train a law enforcement officer on de-escalation tactics, on recognizing special behaviors, on, not immediately going for the lethal option, but actually using non-lethal tactics. It takes longer than 6 months. At the same time, the criteria for how these individuals get in should also change as well. But we will follow that story as it goes along. I don't have a lot of hope in the fact that if it goes like the Tamir Rice case, I think those officers will be cleared. And again, it just goes to show you that the dissension between law enforcement and people of color is only going to get wider, because when it comes down to it, America said a long time ago, you're okay with killing black people as long as you're a police officer, because no matter what, they'll see it as justified. And yet they still wonder why they have such a hard time getting people of color to work with them. Maybe it's because you got a green light on us. That's all I'm saying. But moving along, guys, it is amazing to me that, I keep talking about education. And I say education because education is one of the most vital things in our country. And yet at the same time, they're finding out that, there's a problem.
This morning, experts are citing new data showing the pandemic has hindered the learning and
hang on, guys. We might have a slight problem because apparently I'm telling too much truth today. So if I'm telling too much truth, that must mean that we're getting heckled or slowed down. Let me try it one more time, guys. 1 second, because it may not. Yeah, I think they got us. And it's amazing to me. And again, I want to cover this, but yes, before our graphic died, that I did talk about America's children falling behind, because they're trying to say that we're struggling to reach critical development and social milestones, being able to read and write at defined levels. And they're blaming the pandemic. They're blaming on remote learning. But let's also be honest. When it comes to education is pretty much like the free lunch that's going around right now. Some states have it, some states don't. Some states don't believe that, giving free lunch to children is a great idea, while others believe that, hey, y'all will figure it out. And because of these measures, education budgets being cut every fiscal year, which means more schools are doing with less. Forget that pre-K and Head Start are pretty much out the window now. And at the same time, look at what's being taught. Our educational system is a joke. And at the same time, I keep saying education reform should have happened a long time ago. Technology should have been utilized way faster. At the same time, we really need to be reevaluating what we are teaching our kids in school. Because if we look at what's happening, if we look what's being taught overseas, I always say it best. Look at what England is doing with their educational system. Look what Japan's doing with their educational system. Look what New Zealand is doing. Look what Australia is doing. Because there seems to be a difference in their education system versus ours. Because the simple fact of the matter is, we are behind a lot. I mean, we are still dealing with a metric system that we are the only country that uses it. Freedom units, as they call it. But just to really sum that up the best way I know how, guys, it's just the fact that, you know what, they just truly do refuse to get with the times. And it's sad to say that. But again, shouldn't be surprised. And another thing that Biden and Democrats could bring up is to really give education. If education had the same if education had the same blank check the Department of Defense does, we have smarter people and less wars. I really do believe that. But let me see if we're back up again. We're still not. Okay, guys. Well, I'm not going to try to fight it because I think we had a little too much truth today. Because the simple fact of the matter, it's just that, hey, it goes that way sometimes. So I did want to talk about a good news segment. It doesn't look like it's going to let it fly just because, let's see. Does this bring this up? Nope, still not bringing it up. So yeah, I'm sorry, guys. Our graphics have died. So I know usually we have a feel good news segment. Unfortunately, this time we don't because again, it seems we spoke too much truth tonight. But I did want to cover with this, guys. Again, encourage others, be around others. I know tomorrow is the 4th of July. For a lot of us, it's just a day off. I mean, for a lot of us, like myself, Juneteenth was really our day we celebrated, although some companies still don't see it as some companies don't see it as a federal holiday, and some of us even had to work. But on the good old 4th of July, America, again, I don't see that as a day of freedom. That's just me. I will be honest about it. I see it as a day to get with family and friends, enjoy some food, don't have to work for 8 hours. Just, try to relax. Life's already hard. So my feel good segment for you guys tonight, I will say this because again, our graphics have just died. But I will say this, whenever it does come to the fact of just being around for tomorrow, if you're working tomorrow, may it go quickly. If you're not working tomorrow, spend some time with family and friends. Kick back, enjoy, try to breathe a little bit. Life's already rough enough. So try, remember the little wins. Remember the wins, the little victories. Those are the ones that rack up. And, again, life is hard. But again, this too shall pass. I hope that was encouraging enough. I know graphics messed me up. So, I had next to nothing and I still don't have anything. So, with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it just because, again, graphics have died. It's always funny about that graphics, here's how you know you've done something. Because if you've done something to the point to where everything stops working, that's saying a lot. But again, I digress. But I do want to thank you all who liked, who watched, who shared, who let this know this is live. I thank you from the bottom of my heart because without you, none of this is possible. You can definitely catch me, Black_Spartan615 on the interwebs, as I do requests and do reviews on everything. Very sociable guy. You can talk to me about politics, things of that nature. Just don't be weird. That's all I ask. There's already enough weird people out there. If you want to talk about politics, cool. If you want to talk about what can be done or things of that nature, as far as building bridges, things of that nature, cool. I'm all for that. Just don't be weird. That's all I ask. Just don't be weird. I don't want to have to block you. Just don't be weird. Aside from that, guys, link at the bottom, make that a little bit bigger for you guys to see. If you copy and paste that link into your browser, we'll take you my link to that to YouTube and Facebook groups for all my podcasts. How the Frack We Got Here, Get Bit, off of this podcast. Also, programming note, guys. This Friday we will not have a Get Bit podcast. Like I said, we all need a break. It's rough. We all need a break. So definitely, we are definitely taking the time off. So again, we will be back next Friday for that. Also, check out Blurred's Eye View as a friend, as the captain of that ship that was also in here. Chris Fury, definitely check them out. We're also on vacation as they're gearing up for BlurCon, so definitely check them out. Definitely check that out as well. Also, guys, I usually have this up, but I'm going to stick with this Blur Station beta. Why Blur Station? Because if my graphs are working, I could tell you about BlurStation.com, and we're still not working, so it's okay. So Blur Station beta, also BlurStation.com. I have talked about this site because, again, it is our Amazon, it is our Hulu, it is our Netflix. It is a spot to where we can actually show our content that we own, and then it can call a place of our own. So definitely check out blurredstation.com if you do get a chance. If you do want to join, please select the login and then select the join now, select the Blurred's Eye View Affinity membership. And there you can select my name, Black Spartan, or others, up to you. It all goes to the same cause. And it's $10.99 a month. $10.99 a month to basically enjoy Blurred Station. After 36 months of paying $10.99 a month, you may have the option of owning a piece of Blurred Station. A lot easier to own a little piece of a media conglomerate such as that, because other than that, you're paying an assload amount of money the other way. That also being said, again, I cannot stress this enough. As my friend Reverend Navy would usually say, a like, a share, and a follow costs nothing but means everything in the world. So definitely like, share, sub, let people know about this, because my job, my mission statement here on How the Frack We Got Here is to get people involved. That's it. That's my mission. That's literally all I do. If I am able to do at least that, and I mean that, if I'm able to do at least that, then getting people involved, more active about current events, getting active in your local and state governments, and really pushing some issues. If it engages people to become actors instead of bystanders, my work is done. And like I said, guys, we are in a heavy-ass election season. Yes, you might have a choice between Biden and Trump, and that choice should be beyond nothing obvious, if not already. At the same time, guys, if you yourself have other elections going on in your city and state, get to know the candidates, pressure them, get some answers, because if you haven't noticed by now, voting is essential. Very much so. And without that, guys, you've seen what happens when we don't vote. And I'm sorry, I don't think the world can withstand a second round of Dorito, especially a Dorito that's now immunity empowered. So again, get out there, get registered, get others to register, get vote early if you can. There will be early voting. I've taken advantage of that many times, but definitely do that. At the same time, guys, if you yourself want to be a public servant, whether running for office in your city or state, there are plenty of sites out there. I will actually, as of next week, I will actually start showing these sites that can actually help you. So if you do want to run for office, it'll certainly show you how to get registered in your city and state, and hopefully you run and be able from there and actually make a change. But like I said, guys, we cannot stay on the sidelines for this one. We all need to act, because we can definitely not afford another season of the Dorito Show. So with that being said, guys, last thing I say about How the Frack We Got Here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel, guys. We are simply giving you all the information, but allow you to make up your own mind. But we do provide a lot of perspective that goes along with it. We do better as society when we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first Black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to federal board of governors, electing our first Black woman as the National Cybersecurity Advisor. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go about our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians in the still? But why are we electing different politicians, but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack We Got Here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other. We'll get through this. Peace.